Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs War Room Update. We're on day number 346 of the war. It's unbelievable to say that we still have 101 hostages still being held in Gaza. On the ground, the IDF forces are continuing to operate all over, destroying the Hamas's really very substantial terrorist infrastructure all over. Hundreds of kilometers of tunnels that Hamas had dug and spent billions of dollars building and digging are now being destroyed by the IDF forces. There's a little bit of an argument going on as to how many of these tunnels actually crossed from the Gaza Strip into Egypt, how many from Egypt into Israel, how many into Gaza, how many of them were operative, how many of them were blocked by the Egyptians. But what we're talking about is somewhere in the region of 90 different tunnels crossing through the borders into Egypt. Some of them were open, some of them weren't. It's very clear, though, that those tunnels were a fundamental part of Hamas's strategy, both to arm itself with weapons and to provide itself with food, fuel, clothing, and all of the other really trappings of life that were brought in through the tunnels and overground through the Rafah crossing when it was allowed. Excuse me, and when it was allowed, because it was just openly, clearly civilian goods. So that was definitely something which was a source of much discussion over the last few days. In Lebanon, we've seen the continuation really of the war of attrition. It's going on with more and more force. It seems that Hezbollah is escalating the situation constantly, with really barrages of rockets being fired over the last few days. On Shabbat in the morning, a huge barrage being fired as far south as Tiberias and the surrounding area. Today, we've also seen continuing barrages and UAVs coming from Hezbollah. At some stage, sooner, I hope, rather than later, that is a threat that Israel is going to have to face head on. There is no chance of a political solution being found there. Any political solution will allow Hezbollah to continue attacking whenever they see fit, without any type of guarantees that they will ever maintain any agreement, in the same way as they breached the Resolution 1701, which ended the Second Lebanon War in 2006. So they will now breach every type of agreement which can be reached with them. They are a genocidal terrorist group similar to Hamas, and therefore the ability to come to any type of really reliable agreement is something which should be placed under a very, very big question mark. In Judea and Samaria, the terror is all over. In the north, in Samaria, the terrorist squads, terror cells, trying their best to carry out as many attacks as possible. We've seen sending suicide bombers to Tel Aviv. We've seen them trying to prepare more explosive car bombs that would be placed anywhere and anywhere. We saw last week, as Yoni so correctly corrected me, the placing of a car bomb on the path of a school bus, something which could have been tremendously really damaging and both lethal had it actually been able to been exploded as the bus went by. We saw also a few other car bombs over the weekend, a week and a half ago. Terror from all sides, shooting attacks, knifing attacks. Just last night in Shar Shechem, Damascus Gate, an Israeli policeman was stabbed by a Palestinian, and we've seen that terror really exploding all over the place. We woke up, as many of you will know already, we woke up yesterday morning to the sound of sirens over most of Israel. I was in synagogue in Shul at 6:30 in the morning. Suddenly, huge explosions being heard outside. That was the ballistic missile that had been fired from Yemen by the Houthis. Obviously, the common denominator for all of those is Iran pulling its strings in all directions, trying to influence the Egyptians to demand that all Israeli forces leave the Philadelphia corridor and allow Hamas, their proxy in the south, to continue living and fighting on. Hezbollah pulling their strings, as we know, Hassan Nasrallah has openly declared that his goal is to turn Lebanon into another district of Iran. The Houthis acting on behalf of the Iranians, with reports coming out this morning of, well, where exactly did they get those ballistic missiles that they've been firing? Where did they get the ballistic missile that they fired yesterday morning? The Iranians denying that they provided that a ballistic missile to the Houthis, saying that the Houthis, this like little terrorist organization, strong terrorist organization, albeit, but not an organization that could independently develop its own ballistic missiles. And the Iranians saying, well, no, of course we didn't do that. And who would not believe the Iranians? To help us unwrap and unravel a little bit of what's going on, we're joined today by JCFA Center fellow Yoni Ben Menachem, veteran journalist and Arab affairs expert. Yoni, thanks for joining us. Thank you for having me. Yoni, give us a little bit of a breakdown on what's happening on all of these different fronts. I want to focus, as we gave the title to today's briefing, the explosion from the east. That means from Judea and Samaria, from Iran, from the Houthis. Let's focus a little bit more on that. What's going on? Okay, we'll start with the Houthis, and to follow up on what you said, you should bear in mind that the Houthis, they are, of course, a militia, and they're not a country, but they do have a military industry, very developed one, and it was built by the Iranians, and they are technical advisors and military advisors of the Revolutionary Guards based in Yemen, and they are helping the Houthis to produce these missiles and drones, very high quality and very developed. So when the Iranian says we did not deliver them to Yemen, to the Houthis, they might be right technically, but they are the ones who are behind it. They are the ones who the materials and all the know-how. Yeah, they set up the military industries of the Houthis, and they are helping them to manufacture these missiles and UAVs. So this is one point. We have to bear in mind also that the Houthis, you know, we tend to maybe underestimate. I hear a lot of laughs in Israel about the Houthis, and but we tend to underestimate their capabilities. But they are very dangerous militia, very vindictive, and they never give up on their targets and the goals of the war or the goals of the jihad. And we saw for the last 5-6 years the war that they launched on Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, the United Emirates. They drove them crazy. They are very dangerous, and you know, they paralyzed half of the oil industry of the Saudis in 2018 when they attacked with ballistic missiles and drones the El Bukek Aramco oil facilities of Saudi Arabia, and they caused a lot of economic damage to Saudi Arabia. Now there is a ceasefire between the Saudis and the Houthis, but you know, the war can renew itself, and so now we have to take into consideration that this is a long war with the Houthis. They are a very dangerous enemy, and the thing that now is very worrying for the Israeli security system is the fact that in the last 2 weeks or 3 weeks, the Houthis have sent a few hundreds of Houthi fighters to south of Syria, and they are located now in Sweda area, which is Sweda is the capital of the south of Syria, and also to the area of the triangles of the borders between Syria, Jordan, and Israel. And what are they doing there? Why did they come there? So one option is that they are preparing for an Israeli attack on Lebanon, and they want to participate and help Hezbollah against the IDF. But also another scenario which is possible and very worrying is that they are going to attack Israel from there, because this is very close to Israel. They can either launch rockets or missiles from that area, or they can infiltrate
into the north of the Jordan Valley or into the Golan Heights and carry out terror attacks and massacres in the Israeli settlements. So the army is very worried about that. And, I would suggest to the Prime Minister Netanyahu that if he wants to retaliate about this ground missile that they launched yesterday towards Israel, then I think one target should be these new camps of the Houthi fighters in south of Syria. And the other thing is to re-attack El Hudaydah port, El Hudaydah harbor. It was a very successful attack, and now they are trying to rebuild the harbor again, and we should destroy it all completely. And why is it so important to destroy it completely? Because this will put a lot of pressure on the Houthis, because this is how the food is coming into Yemen, through the sea to this port, and also the weapon deliveries that the Iranians are sending them are coming from that through this harbor in Hudaydah. So this should be, again, a target, a very important target for Israel. It was a very successful attack, and they sat quietly for a while, but of course, they're never going to stop the war against Israel, the jihad against Israel. They're very stubborn, and it will take years. This is why it's very important to strike them back very hard, so in order to achieve more quiet from that front, because they're not going to stop. Unless they said, I listened yesterday to the speech of the head of the Houthis, Abdel Malek al-Houthi, and he said until the war in Gaza will not stop, as long as the war continues there, we will continue with our jihad against Israel. So since it's going to be a long war in Gaza, as the way it looks now, so we're going to have another front with the Houthis, and are not going to give up, and are going to make all sort of innovations, all sort of new attacks, new methods to try and take Israel. Now they're sending their fighters to south of Syria. They will come out with other tricks, I'm sure. They're very sophisticated.
With the Houthis, the last time the Houthis carried out what they called a successful attack, it was just by the American consulate, what used to be the American embassy in Tel Aviv, sending a drone that appears to have crossed all the way up the Red Sea, along the border on that seam line between Israel and Egypt, and then around through over the sea into Tel Aviv. This time they chose a different course entirely. The ballistic missiles straight really to the heart of Israel, and really that in itself was a very different type of action that we haven't yet seen from them. And yet when we discuss the idea of an Iranian direct attack on Israel, when we were talking back in April, it seemed to come with a very, very clear price to be paid. At the moment, we're not even seeing any type of discussion of an Israeli response to the firing of the ballistic missile. In response to the UAV on Tel Aviv, we attacked in the port of Hudaydah. Are there other substantial assets of the Houthi, Yoni, which could be the focus of that type of attack? Even going back to Hudaydah, if I understand correctly, they've managed to rebuild and almost re-establish the port itself. What could be really the balance of power against the Houthi? The US is leading the task force, even sanctioned by the UN Security Council under the famous Chapter 7 to fight against the Houthi, but they don't really seem to be doing very much. And so it leaves Israel to fight a battle 2,000 kilometers away from home.
Exactly. First of all, the Prime Minister said very clearly yesterday that Israel is going to retaliate, and I'm sure that we will retaliate. How we will retaliate, I don't know if we'll go that far to Yemen again, because we are preparing now for a big war in Lebanon against the Hezbollah. But I'm sure that at least Israel will attack these bases of the Houthis in the south of Syria. This is very close and very easy to do military-wise. So I think this there's a potential there for an Israeli retaliation. As for what you talked about, the international community and the international coalition, we have to say it very bluntly and very straightforward. The American administration is not interested now in what is happening in the Middle East because they are concentrating on the campaign, trying to make Kamala Harris win the elections, and they will do. The only interest in the Middle East is to prevent escalation, something that might affect the chances of Kamala Harris to be elected as the new American president. This is all they care about, and they will not do anything against the Houthis. Essentially, the international coalition that the Americans set up in the Red Sea is only a defensive one to protect Israel from attacks of the Houthis, but not to attack the Houthis themselves. They don't want to go into any sort of confrontation with Iran. Also, the Iranians are cooperating with the Americans because I spoke today to a senior security source in Israel, and the estimation is that the Iranians that are helping now, trying to help the American administration so that Kamala Harris will win and be the next president of the United States. The Iranians don't want Donald Trump to be elected as the new president because they remember very well that he's the one who ordered the assassination of Qasem Soleimani, is the one who withdrew from the nuclear agreement with Iran and also imposed very harsh sanctions on Iran. So the Iranians don't want anything to do with Donald Trump, and they're trying now to help Kamala Harris to be elected as the new American president. How can you help them? You just don't allow any escalation against American facilities, and they're calming things down now, the Iranians, until the 5th of November, trying to help Kamala Harris to be elected as the new president.
That's it's unbelievable to hear, but when you present it in such a very clear manner, Yoni, it's something that has to be on the minds of everyone. The Iranians want Kamala Harris to win the elections, and they are scared of Donald Trump. Similarly, we heard yesterday Iranians saying that they're also not sure what they're doing with their response against Israel, even for the assassination of Haniyeh, because they fear Netanyahu and what he can next pull out of his sleeve. It seems like there's a common enemy of the Iranians and almost a figure that they would be happy to see in the White House. Is that, do you think, a specific goal of theirs to ensure that at the moment, at least for the next month and a half until the elections, there is no escalation here? Do you think that they will be pushing even to provide a few more cherries, even to Kamala Harris, persuading maybe Hamas to show a little bit more flexibility on the hostage deal? Is that something that the Iranians are pushing for?
I don't think so. I don't think that they can influence Yahya Sinwar, because Yahya Sinwar, in that subject of the Israeli hostages, he has his own agenda. But definitely the Iranians, I'm sure, can almost bet on it that they will not escalate until November 5th, until the day of the elections. They are hoping that Kamala Harris will win. Also, the Palestinians are very interested that Kamala Harris will win. I saw a few articles in the Arab media calling the Arabs in Michigan and the Democratic Party to vote for Kamala Harris, even though they were very upset with the Biden policy because towards Israel during the war. They now are the new hero. Now is Kamala Harris, and they are calling the Arabs in the United States to vote for Kamala Harris. So we see what is happening. And as for the Americans, they are very worried of an escalation between Israel and Hezbollah. This is why they are sending Amos Hochstein to Israel and to Lebanon to try and mediate between Israel and Hezbollah for some sort of an agreement. I think this is a lost case because Hassan Nasrallah is very mad at Amos Hochstein. He blames him since the assassination of Fuad Shuker, the chief of staff of Hezbollah. He started blaming Amos Hochstein that he deceived Hezbollah because Amos Hochstein apparently, before the assassination of Fuad Shuker, he visited Beirut and he told Nabi Berri, the head of the parliament, who is a very close friend of Hassan Nasrallah, to convey a message from the United States that the Americans are making sure that Israel will not attack in Beirut. And apparently what happened was an attack in the Dahia, where the Israel assassinated Fuad Shuker. And from that day, Hassan Nasrallah calls Amos Hochstein a liar and a crook, and he doesn't want to hear anything, to have nothing to deal with him. So actually, I think the visit of Amos Hochstein to the region is basically to try and persuade Israel not to escalate. I think that the Americans understand that Netanyahu has to escalate, but what they will try to do, from what I hear, is that try to get out of Netanyahu a promise that it will be a gradual escalation and that the main escalation will be after the 5th of November, after the day of the elections, so that a full war between Israel and the Hezbollah will break only after the 5th of November. So I think this is his mission now, to try and arrange something that will help Kamala Harris also.
Is Hochstein and the Biden administration, I know this is a ridiculous question, but I'm going to ask it anyway, Yoni. Is Biden and his administration and Hochstein blind to the fact that Hezbollah has carried out over 3,000 attacks against Israel's north, over 15,000 rockets, missiles, UAVs, that Israel has almost 70,000 civilians who have been displaced from their houses, can no longer go back to their houses. And that war of attrition has been going on, if we're on day number 346 with the war with Gaza. So that war has been going on for 345 days. And Hezbollah is the one who is constantly escalating that situation, as I described it in the introduction, even over Shabbat, firing as south as Tiberias. And Israel can no longer tolerate that type of aggression, that type of war against our country, against our citizens. And it's time that we respond, irrelevant of the American elections.
Look, the President Biden and Kamala Harris, they know very well the situation. Because the head of the CIA, William Burns, is very close to President Biden, and he appreciates him, and he has all the information. And also Lloyd Austin knows exactly the picture. He speaks on a daily basis with the Defense Minister Gallant. And they know the full picture, but I think what they're trying to do now is trying to ask Israel to confront the Hezbollah gradually, and not to exaggerate before the 5th of November. And on the other hand, they are asking to Iran, they're asking Iran in the secret channel that they have with Iran to also talk to the Hezbollah and make the Hezbollah also not escalate before the 5th of November. This is all to ensure the safe election for Kamala Harris. I think they are working on both tracks now, trying to save the candidacy of Kamala Harris, hoping that they will win in the election. I think this is what they're working on. I think they know that it's a lost case, and Hassan Nasrallah is very stubborn. He's not going to stop the war against Israel, the attrition war. And they also understand the difficulties of the Israelis and the political situation of Netanyahu. And now they know that Netanyahu is chair of prime minister in order to stay for another 2 years. Now he wants to expand the coalition change the defense minister, bring in Gideon Sa'ar, have a wider coalition for another 2 years to guarantee that there will be a budget for 2 years, and all sort of political deals that Netanyahu is doing to stay in power. So they understand now that Netanyahu is not going anywhere, and the only thing that they can do is try to slow things down so they will not escalate too much before the 5th of November in order for Kamala Harris to have a chance in the election.
And if we're talking about delusions, Yoni, let's talk a little bit about Judea and Samaria, the Palestinian Authority. We saw the extensive operation carried out by the IDF in Tulkarem, in Jenin, in Shechem, just about 2 weeks ago, with really huge amounts of weapons being uncovered, bomb-making factories. Judea and Samaria seems to be going in a very, very bad trajectory. From the south, from Hebron, we saw the 2 car bombs coming out. What is there too? The US administration is trying to prop up the revitalized Palestinian Authority, but really they're not revitalized. It's the same terrorists doing the same things with the same support of terrorism. So what's changing there?
Well, we have to, it's a good thing, a good question that you brought this subject up, because I think that Israel made a very good decision to go out to this military operation called summer camps. It's called in Hebrew summer camps, Machanot Kaitz, which was actually a preemptive strike against the terror groups in the north of Samaria, because after the bombing of the terrorists in Tel Aviv, which was supposed to be a suicide bombing, Israel understood, and also an official announcement of the military wing of Hamas that they are renewing the suicide attacks inside Israel. So Israel understood at the right moment that this is very dangerous, what is going to happen, and where Hamas wants to take Israel to another bloody events like in the Second Intifada, or what happened in the Second Intifada. So Israel initiated very quickly a preemptive strike, which is called this military operation Summer Camp. And now, so far, we're talking about 2 weeks have passed since the beginning of this operation. The IDF has successes. They killed about 40 terrorists. They arrested a few dozens. But we have to remember, Maurice, that in the north of Samaria, the estimations of the IDF is that we have at least 1,000 armed terrorists. 1,000. So far, we killed 40 terrorists and arrested a few more, dozens more, but we still have a lot of work to do there. What is the problem there? The problem is that once the IDF goes into Jenin and its refugee camp, or Tulkarem and its refugee camps, most of the terrorists are escaping from there to the rural area, to the villages that in the mountains, far from Jenin and far from Tulkarem, and they're only leaving behind a few dozen terrorists to fight against the IDF. So the IDF usually kills most of them or arrests most of them, but the big number has escaped to the mountains. So I think that the military now, the IDF has to change the way it operates in the north of Samaria, and in order to uproot this terrorist infrastructure, the military operation has to be wider. So far, the IDF is using 2 brigades to carry out this operation. This is not enough. We need 2 divisions, at least 2 divisions, to occupy all of the north of Samaria and surround, put a siege on the rural area, so that terrorists cannot escape and hide there, and then go into Jenin, Tulkarem, and Nablus. This is the way it should be done. I even wrote a long article about it, so I hope that the army will change its tactics, but it's important what the army is doing, because this is a preemptive strike against the terror groups in the north of Samaria, who are trying also, as you mentioned, to have terrorist attacks inside Israel. So far, they've manufactured 6 booby-trapped cars and luckily nobody was injured. Shin Bet arrested one of the terrorists who admitted in his interrogation that it is Hamas, and the one who is behind all of these terror organizations of Hamas and trying to revive suicide attacks in Israel is Zahir Jabarin. As you remember, he is the head of the military wing of Hamas in Judea and Samaria. He's located in Turkey, and he is behind all of these attacks, of course, in full coordination with Yahya Sinwar in the Gaza Strip.
That's one of the decisions that seemed to be a little bit questionable at the time, Yoni, was at the end of the operation in Samaria, there seemed to have been a decision to allow the Palestinian Authority to bring in armed policemen, soldiers, whatever you want to call them, in order to basically take over the security situation there. Is that something which is actually going to happen? Can we rely on the Palestinian Authority? Why would we have allowed armed Palestinian Authority terrorists to replace the other terrorists?
This is a spin of the IDF and the PA. I will have hairs growing on my hand here if the PA will fight terrorism. They're not going to do anything. This is all a game in the media. And, you know, the Israeli Shin Bet knows that, the IDF knows that, the American knows that, and Abu Mazen is playing these games of lies that he wants to fight terrorism. Why is he doing that? Because he wants to get the money from the donors. This is what he's thinking of. He doesn't think about fighting terrorism. And when his associates, aides, are asking him why will not fight them? Because you know, they are also risking us, risking our rules in the West Bank. Why should we not fight against Hamas? They are against us also. So what does he tell them? He's telling them, when they will come here to Ramallah and threaten the Muqata'a and threaten my chair, then I will fight them. But as long as they're killing the Jews, I don't mind. I don't want to go into Palestinian history with the heritage of the one who embarked a civil war in Judea and Samaria and the West Bank, and I will go down in the Palestinian history as the one who created this civil war with the Palestinian people. This is what he's telling them. So he doesn't want to do anything.
What we talk about a lot at the JCFA, Yoni, is this idea of perception warfare. And you cannot imagine the number of questions I received to my email asking, well, why is Israel allowing these Palestinian Authority armed terrorists to go and take control there? And trying to explain what you just explained now, that this is part of this disinformation that's going on constantly. It's very hard to discern from the open news sources what is true, what is not true. The idea that the Palestinian Authority will ever fight terrorism, as you said, hairs will grow on your palm. I'll grow my hair back on my head, and I'll again have a ponytail as I did when I was much younger. But this idea of, I think people don't really understand the notion of, there is this body called the Palestinian Authority. It receives tens of millions of dollars, even during the period of the Taylor Force Act, from the US administration. It is meant to be fighting terrorism, but it just doesn't. And yet we allow it to continue functioning, and we all continue on playing the same game, as if they're fighting terrorism, as if they have an intention to fight terrorism, when really everybody knows exactly what you just said. They'll never fight terrorism.
They'll never. It's more than that, because we have the military wing of the Fatah, which is the ruling party of which is the backbone of the PA. The military wing of Fatah, Kataib Shuhada al-Aqsa, Kataib Shuhada al-Aqsa, Al-Aqsa Martyrs, it's called in Arabic. They are the ones who are collaborating with Hamas and Islamic Jihad in the north of Samaria and fighting against the IDF. They're shooting at the IDFs. They are full participant in this war against the IDF. Not only that, we have defections of PA security people who are leaving their job at the PA and go and join these armed groups and carrying out terror attacks. And Abu Mazen, he doesn't do anything to stop this phenomenon.
And some of
And
them are just staying in their jobs as Palestinian security forces and fighting against Israel no matter what.
yeah, they want to get their salary from the PA at the same time to get money from Iran to fight against Israel. They have a double salary.
It's unbelievable to hear. And if we're talking about salaries, Yoni, I know that we said we'd focus on the East, but we have to say a little word about Hamas. Hamas reportedly paid salaries to many of its employees. Just in the last few days, millions of dollars paid out in cash to the different Hamas employees and representatives that are in Gaza, something that we haven't seen reported previously. This, I assume, is quite a serious development.
Yes, the money is coming from Iran. This is one source. Iran is financing the war against Israel. The second source, you will not believe, is the humanitarian aid that is coming into Gaza, because Hamas takes over these shipments of the humanitarian aid and is selling them in the market in Gaza. This is supposed to be free for the people of Gaza, but they're taking over it and they're selling them, and they have another income. So they have a lot of money now, both from Iran and from the incomes from the humanitarian aid that are confiscating and stealing from the Palestinians in Gaza, and they sell it in the markets, and they have a good income, so they can pay salaries. Not only pay salaries, they can recruit new recruits to fill the gaps that are the gaps that are created because of the war. They can rebuild the battalions, the platoons that the Israeli army destroyed during the war, and this is how they recruit new people, with money that they get from Iran or by selling the humanitarian aid.
The last report I saw, Yoni, was that Hamas has actually earned over $600 million from the humanitarian aid donated by the international community straight into the pockets of Hamas.
Yes, they are financing Hamas, knowingly or not knowing. I'm sure they know that it's not a secret. Every kid in Gaza knows that it's not a secret. Everybody's talking about it, and I think it's about time that the Israeli government will adopt at least a few items in the proposal of General Giora Island, what is called the General's Plan, to take over the humanitarian aid. And Israel, the IDF, will have to distribute this humanitarian aid to the Palestinians. Once we take it from Hamas, then the center of power will go to Israel and not to Hamas, and there will be in a big problem. And also, if you know this plan of General Island, it's talking about occupying the north of Gaza Strip and evacuating 200,000 Palestinians that are now in the north of Gaza, evacuated them to the south of Gaza, and destroy all the military infrastructure of Hamas in that area, and set up the security zone that will protect the settlements of Israeli settlements on the border with Gaza. This is a very good plan. I heard some reports that Prime Minister Netanyahu is considering to adopt this plan, or at least they will bring it to cabinet to discuss it. Maybe it will adopt some of the ideas in that plan. I think this is a good direction.
It's just an idea of going systematically from north to the south to ensure that every part of the terrorist infrastructure has been destroyed, because we've seen remnants of that terror infrastructure just over the last few days. We saw rockets being fired at Ashkelon, just north of the Gaza Strip, and so that terror infrastructure still exists even in the north of the Gaza Strip. And at some stage, we have to say we're going to go back and systematically destroy it. That's something which we don't appear to have done all the way through, either taking and cutting off Hamas from its southern source of oxygen and arms, the Philadelphia corridor, and on the other hand, coming down from the north and saying, well, we're not going to allow these terror tunnels, this terror infrastructure to continue to exist, but we're going to go systematically and destroy it. That would seem like it should have been one of the goals from the start.
Yeah, so as I told you, I think that the Prime Minister now takes very seriously this plan of General Giora Island, and he will probably already looking into it, and maybe will bring it to the cabinet, and maybe after he changes the defense minister, it will be more easy for a new defense minister to adopt such a plan, because there's ego problems involved and so on. So between the generals, so let's hope for the good.
Politics will be politics, even in the military echelon, you're saying?
Yeah, of course. Especially during wars, there is very intensive politics.
Here we have another subject that really does come in, and really it's the place of people like General Island and the think tanks that have been coming in and suggesting ways to operate. I know that we at the JCPA, together with the IDSF, already back in December, suggested that Israel take control of the humanitarian aid, and that we develop that as something which would really take away from Hamas its huge base of support. And really, unfortunately, we're $500 million too late, and 11 months too late, maybe adopting that change of position. Maybe it's something that will be considered going forward. Yoni, as we come to the end, you know what my question is already. What's the silver lining in all of this? Excuse me. The Houthis are firing ballistic rockets at us. The Iranians are trying to get Kamala Harris elected. Hezbollah is annoyed with Amos Hochstein and is firing more. Hamas is trying to dig its heels in Judea and Samaria. We're seeing more terrorism. Where's the silver lining?
Well, first of all, I have to tell you that it's okay to be late, but late is better than never. So, as you mentioned, the idea of a military government or a Israeli civil administration in Gaza, which was our idea from the beginning, I think that Netanyahu is going there. He doesn't want to declare it publicly yet, but I think he's putting the foundations now, because there's no other choice for the day after the war. It has to be in Israeli control. So I think we are going there. This is I think Netanyahu is doing it very slowly, is putting the foundations, trying to get international legitimacy for this idea without saying that it's an occupation. He's going to say that it's something temporary until they will find a new Palestinian rule, which is not Hamas or the PAs that will control Gaza after the war. But I think he's putting the foundations now. So we have to be optimistic. I also think that we don't know exactly what will happen as far as politics is concerned. But, there are, as we speak, there are the news editions are full with reports about replacing the defense minister and bringing in a new one. I don't know if it will come out in the end or not, but if there will be a new defense minister, I think that there will be a strategic change in the way the war is going on, especially in Gaza, because Gideon Saar, who is the one who is supposed to be the new defense minister, according to the reports, I don't know exactly what will happen in the end, but he has very good ideas in what we are talking about, what in the line that we are talked about, very new ideas to make strategic change in Gaza and also in the north. So this is, I think, maybe some sort of hope for the future.
Maybe a fresh set of eyes coming into the same situation, coming with new ideas, with different ideas, can change the situation on the ground, which seemed to be pretty much stagnant. And it's something that we also have been, at the JCFA, have been really advocating for to change the paradigms in all of these discussions, in the negotiations with Hamas to bring about the release of the hostages, in the way that the war is fought, and what should the strategic goals be, and really to isolate Hamas in order to really provide the basis for its destruction. These are all things which I think going forward really do need that change of policy that is so required.
I can assure you that the Prime Minister and I think also the security establishment is reading very seriously our analysis of the situation and the ideas that are bringing up in our papers. And I think this is a good thing that, we should continue with this work.
That I think is something that we're going to continue on with, and really we do have I can say personally from the project of the initiative for the Palestinian Authority accountability and reform, there are a number of different things that are coming up in the next few weeks that will be really developing on those subjects. And so to our audience, watch this space, as they say. But for now, Yoni, thank you very much for your insights. To our audience, thank you again for joining us, and we will be back with you again on Wednesday. In the meantime, everyone, stay safe.
Thank you very much for having me.